Hey, welcome to The Feast Life, where we empower you, the modern homeschool mom, to create a life and homeschool you love. I'm Julie Ross, the creator of the award-winning curriculum A Gentle Feast, a homeschool veteran of over 20 years, and a certified Christian life coach. Charlotte Mason said, life should be all living, not a mere tedious passing of time. So on this show, we seek to savor the feast of life. So go get your favorite beverage and pull up a chair. You're welcome at this table.
Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Feast Life. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and I am here today with the beautiful Leslie Martino. Hey Leslie.
Hello.
I'm so excited you're here to talk about your new book, The Joy of Slow. So thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. So before we jump into your book and hear all the things, because I really can't wait to jump into this conversation, can you just give everyone just a brief lowdown of Leslie's world?
Yes. So my world includes my family, my kids, my husband. We live in Central Florida, and my kids range from, I have four kids, and they range from 10 to 14. And we have been homeschooling since the very beginning. They don't know any other setting. I myself was involved in the world of education, I feel like my entire life.
Yeah.
And this is just another step, another stage, another arena we've been exploring for the last however many years, homeschooling, and it's been wonderful. So that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah. I was reading your bio and I think we have similar backgrounds. I was also a former public school teacher
Oh, okay.
and then was like, I don't want this for my own children. So I started homeschooling them. And I don't know if people say this to you, but people say to me all the time, oh, you're a teacher, so it must be like easier to homeschool and you must know what you're doing. And I'm like, no, actually, I think it was harder for me to homeschool because I was like in this mode of this is the only way children can learn and this is the way we must do it. Did you have any struggles like that?
So my story is a little bit different. My struggles were a little bit and I hear that all the time as well.
Yeah.
But the thing that was different is that the school environment and the school setting that I worked in were very non-traditional.
Oh,
And
okay. Awesome.
so it was about hands-on learning and small size classrooms. We had mixed age classrooms, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
very, it was part of the like small schools movement. We lived in New York City at the
Okay.
time. That's where I was teaching. And so had these strong ideas about education and the
Yeah.
way we learn from before I even had kids. But when I had kids and I said, okay, now I'm going to homeschool them, the struggle became, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that when it comes to your own children?
Oh, that's
Because
good.
it felt
Yeah.
more experimental. Yeah, do it with other people's
Yeah.
children, but do you really believe it? And so that was the journey, and that was very interesting and brought up a lot of fears that you think you buried and questions that you thought you had down and solid. So it was still a learning experience. It doesn't mean it was all easy, but yeah. So that.
I think it's so important. I think it's so good for people to hear this because
Mhm.
it's, oh, I must be doing something wrong because it's no, all of us homeschool
All
moms
of
who've been
us.
doing it for a long time tell you it is all a journey.
Mhm.
We all were figuring this out.
Exactly. And I bet you if you sat many a school teacher down, you probably agree with me. We would all probably admit that you don't always feel like you know what you're doing either. Like the children teach you, the process teaches you, you teach yourself. You're always learning, you're always growing. That's the whole point. So there are some things that you have down after 10 years that you don't have down maybe at like year one.
Right.
But it's you can't ever stop. You can't say that you ever have it all figured out. This just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
not. I think if you say you have it all figured out, then you're, I don't know if you've heard this phrase, like if you're not growing, you're dying. Like I don't ever want
Right.
to have it all figured out. And
Me neither. Me neither. I think that's
it's
kind
so
of
fun that we get
sad.
to play with our kids and figure this out together. Which I really
Exactly.
feel was like the message of your book in a way. Actually, I wrote down one of my favorite quotes was many of us are afraid to see homeschooling as a creative or playful
Hmm.
endeavor that just seems too risky.
Yes.
I feel
Yes.
like we have to figure it all out before we start day one. And that is a lot of pressure.
Exactly. And it's a lot of pressure, and we start feeling guilty when it doesn't feel smooth, or when we perceive that our children aren't learning, which is probably not true anyway. And it's just pressure. And we forget that our ability to look at it as a playful experience with curiosity, we're
Mm,
going to figure this out together. We're going to enjoy the process is the key to enjoying it all. And if we
yes.
don't allow ourselves to do that, then where's the joy for or the children, for us? But that is scary, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. We like to know that if I just follow this system, then I will get
Uh-huh.
XYZ result. But like our children are not cogs on a factory machine, so that actually doesn't work.
Exactly. And parents seem to get that outside of schooling, like in
Mm,
the world of
yeah.
parenting. It's, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see how that's true. And then you bring schooling into it. It's like,
We must
has to
have
be
all
the,
the systems. Yes.
it's
Tell
the
me exactly
same.
what to do. I can't actually do that because I don't know you or your kids, but I can
Yeah.
share some
Yeah.
advice and some things I've learned along the way. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to take that risk.
Yeah.
And it seems
Yeah.
so scary because we do value education so much. It is such a responsibility and a
Hmm.
blessing to be able to
Yeah.
homeschool. And so I get
For
that.
sure.
It's this fear of
Hmm.
if I screw all this up. Did you ever feel that way when you're homeschooling, or do you get moms that are
Yes.
asking you that?
Yes. Oh, for sure. It's because there's that possibility that exists. Like at the end of the day, you are ruining your
Yeah.
children. You have those thoughts once in a while. People who I've helped and have come to me have those thoughts. And it's always easier to help other people deal with those thoughts
Oh,
sometimes than it is
let me
yourself,
tell
right?
you exactly what I would do if I was in your shoes. But
Right.
when I'm in your shoes, I'm hiding in my bed. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We all experience it. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so let's jump into your book, The Joy of Slow. So
Hmm.
I'm curious about the word slow because,
Mm,
like, when I was growing up, like the slow kids, like if you were in a
mm,
slow reading group or whatever, that was a bad thing. So
mm.
why did you choose slow?
I think in the world of education, some people still think slow is a bad thing
Yeah.
as well. But when I started to homeschool my kids and I was trying to really hone in on what was working for us, what made things go well, what was good about the experience, it wasn't about, am I using a particular curriculum or am I homeschooling with a particular philosophy in mind? It seemed a lot broader than that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I just kept asking myself what it was, I realized that it was about when we slowed down. We
Mm,
were able to capture the most meaningful parts of the experience. And sometimes I say that to parents, what's the most meaningful thing about homeschooling for
yeah.
you, or what's the most joyful part of the experience for you? And
Mm,
everybody is always able to rattle off all these things. But then if you think about how often you experience that, it's usually not as much as you would want to be experiencing it. And I realized that when we slow down, we can. And so in the first chapter of the book, I really did have to lay out what I mean when I say
yeah.
slow and what slow isn't, because I think that it does cause people to assume a lot of things. Like they say, okay, do you just play all day? Is it just is it not doing any schoolwork at all? And it incorporates so much more than that. And I talk about things like homing in on your values and adopting a practice of doing what's meaningful and wanting to build roots with your children that are deep, deep roots, not just wide roots. It's not about covering all the things or all the curriculum. Are we going deeply into the things that we're learning? And are we studying things in a way that are we studying something that you're at least one thing that you're passionate about
Yeah.
that you can even talk about with that sort of depth? I talk about things like whether it is you're using curriculum or not, doing some natural learning or using curriculum. Are you valuing that deep understanding over shallow mastery? Are you uh, is it an environment where it's about doing fewer things better, not doing all the things, but doing fewer
Mm,
things better? It's not about overwhelm and building knowledge and the process of building knowledge and respecting that process and realizing that it's a process. The process is the whole point. Sometimes
yes.
we think that it's the end goal. It's about
Yes.
what you end up learning, what you learn, what you know at the end. And it's no, the
Mhm.
process was the whole point of the experience. So what can we appreciate about the process? And all of these things, I think you need to slow down in different ways. Sometimes our lives need to slow down. Sometimes our brains need to slow down. Sometimes we need to slow down and be reflective about the experience. Sometimes we need to ask ourselves better questions about what kind of experience we're having. So I feel like that word slow was really just a way to incorporate all of that, all of those homing in
Yeah.
on values, reflection in the experience, meaningful learning. That was a way to incorporate all of that.
Yeah, I totally, yeah, the first chapter you did a great job of explaining it really deep, which is good, which is why I wanted to start there. And it's
Mm,
not what we're saying.
right.
This is what it means. And for me,
Hmm.
I saw it, what you were trying to say, as going deep versus shallow,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
quality over quantity. Like we're not just trying
Yeah.
to get through all the stuff and check off all the boxes and be like, we did these 10 assignments today, so we learned, but
Hmm.
being willing to slow down, be
Yeah.
mindful and pause in the moment, but then
Hmm.
also slow down in your life, because when your life
Yeah.
is so overpacked with stuff, your kids don't actually have time to think about and reflect on all this information and stories and ideas that are in their heads. And so we live these rushed
Exactly.
lives as a
Hmm.
society, right? And so it's
Hmm.
like almost education different. Like we're going to do it different. We're not going to keep running this rat race all the time that
Yeah.
our society keeps telling
Yes.
us we have to stay on. We're going to go off
Right.
of it. And this is a slower, gentler
Hmm.
path. Right?
Yes,
Getting
for
that?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And it takes, and to really cultivate deep understanding, to really cultivate curiosity and imagination, it requires time.
Mhm.
And the time it takes to really develop authentic skills, it takes more time than we often allow. I think a lot of times we want to just move through things and get things done quickly. We're constantly telling our children, hurry up and finish this because I have to cook dinner, or hurry up and finish this because we have this appointment to go to, or I'm done. I'm so bored with this math book. I want to be finished by September or
Right.
whatever. I just picked a random month. But so it's all I feel like so much of the messaging is hurry up, hurry up, get it done, finish
Mhm.
this. You have a year
Mhm.
to do it. You have 6 months to do it. And it's just, can our messaging be different? Can we breathe for a moment? Can
Mhm.
we get off of the rat race and really figure out what true education is or what learning really means and explore that a little bit? And it doesn't even mean that we're going to do that every day or we're going to do that. It just means, can we ask some questions and be willing to
Mhm.
explore it and then figure out what piece of it we actually can hold on to that's going to make a difference in our home life.
Yeah.
I
And
think
most
that's
of us,
important
we
too.
don't ask those questions
Yes,
because
exactly.
we don't know the
We
answers.
yes, and we're afraid that we don't know,
Yep.
or because sometimes, like, I'm all about the tension of sitting and not knowing, like just sitting in that place for a while of
Yeah, but
asking a question and not being able to
ooh,
answer
that's
it.
a hard place to sit in, girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I
Yeah.
think that scares people a lot, but
Uh-huh.
I like doing it because I've done it enough that I
Yeah.
know what it yields. And
Mhm.
it's not that I know that when I do that in exactly 1 week, I'm going to have an answer or exactly 1 month. But if you allow yourself to not know and to appreciate the process of getting to know or figuring something out,
Mhm.
there's so much more learning that happens in that place than I don't know. I'm not even willing to think about it or explore how this could be better. And you just keep doing the same thing that wasn't working and you don't even allow yourself to be open to any new possibilities, to anything new, to a new way of doing things, and not even realizing that on the other side of not knowing could be like something that's really life-giving in a way that it's not now.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And I think we have to be willing to sit in that tension if we want our children. And some
Mhm.
people might not want their children to sit in that tension. We just want them like, here's all the things you need to know, and here's why you need to know it, and here's the things that I believe in. You must know these things. But if you
Right.
want to develop like critical thinkers, they have to actually be willing to sit in the tension too, and not expect you to have all the answers and solve all their problems.
Exactly. And we say these lovely things. We want
Oh
our
yeah.
children to be critical thinkers, deep, lifelong learners.
Yeah.
And then it's okay. What does that really mean? What does it take to really get there? What kind of experiences are we really willing to get? Sometimes they don't line up.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I love that. Okay, so we talked about slow. So let's talk about joy.
Yeah.
Why is joy so essential to a life-giving education?
Oh, the thing about joy, like I said before, that slowing down long enough to capture the joy, like what are the most joyful parts of this homeschooling experience? Um, I think that we all want to experience joy. And sometimes what we do is we try to make things fun or we try to seek out joy for the sake of joy without realizing that joy is connected to something so much more meaningful. We're more likely to find joy when we're living a meaningful life. And when our lives are full of experiences that hold intrinsic value for us. And that's something that only you can define and only you can label for you and your family because it's meaningful for you. And in the end, we're slowing down to be more balanced, and having balance allows us to make better choices, to eliminate things we need to eliminate, to incorporate things we need to incorporate, but better choices for ourselves and our families that are not just sensible, like they don't just make sense to everybody. They make sense to us because they're meaningful to us. So I feel like joy is so connected to what's meaningful and what's valuable because we all live with a set of values. And we can experience joy when our lives are aligned with those values. A lot of times we say that something is a high value, and then we do something completely different. And we set up our lives to not even be in accordance with what we're saying we value. And it's like the two have to align. So we have to like really figure that out first. So we can't just use someone else, adopt what someone else thinks is another family's values and say, yeah, that sounds good. We can't do that. We really do have to consider it and think about it. And sometimes we might think we are, but when you see the things that you're like, sometimes I would have, sometimes earlier on, I would have these days where at the end of the day, I was just feeling like, oh, like, why does this feel so hard? Like, why am I not even enjoying this? And then I would think about some of the interactions I had with my children that day, even some of the things we were actually doing and calling school that day. And I realized these are not even things that I value. And I'm not saying, and when I say that in terms of like interactions, I was having interactions. I'm not saying I didn't value my children. I'm saying it's not how I wanted to be with my children. I value
You
deep
weren't showing up in
connection.
the way that you valued.
And I had to sit there and really ask, why is that? Is it because I'm saying that this type of learning, this is the only type of learning that's meaningful, and it can only happen between 8 and 1 o'clock? Is it because what is it? Yeah, again, uncomfortable, but asking those kinds of questions and making sure our lives were highly aligned with things that we value, ways of being that we value. Yeah, it's so important. And I think that's where the joy is.
Yeah, I that's really cool that you were equating that, and you have a whole chapter in your book about finding your meaning and finding your values for yourself. And I always start off with this with my coaching clients is you need to know your why.
Yes.
And it's not someone else's, it has to be yours. And but I
Yes.
like can totally see how the joy lines up with that, because if you're just doing things because the homeschool mom down the street's doing it, or this is what
Mhm.
we're told that education should be, and you
Mhm.
don't actually value those things, it would be really discouraging and depressing.
Yes, for
There
sure.
wouldn't be much joy in that, right?
Mhm.
And that you have to find that for yourself. And I think for me, like when I look back, when I first started homeschooling, I thought it was going to be like Little Women and I was going to be like Marnie and we're all going to sit around and read books and like crochet and stuff. And I tried to make my homeschool like Charlotte Mason Victorian. And
Uh-huh.
as you could probably tell from my background and my shirt, that's not really actually my personality. And I'm like, why am I so miserable? This is,
Right,
and
right.
then I realized
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe it's okay if I bring like disco music into our homeschool because I really like disco and I could put disco balls
Exactly.
around the homeschool room and decorate it like with neon pink lights. And I'm like, I actually like this. I actually like coming to our
Yes.
homeschool room. Like,
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes I think people forget. We see a lot of things out there and they be like, oh, that looks like a great idea. It looks so peaceful, or it looks so whatever. And
yeah,
we think, I'm going to try this. And then we forget our own families
yeah,
who we're actually trying it with, the time when emotions are high, when tensions are high, when just different things, or our own personalities, like you're even expressing. And
yeah.
sometimes we need to figure out what it is about that idea that we actually really that maybe we can adopt but make it fit.
Mhm.
So like maybe in our home, and I'm laughing as I'm about to say this because I was going to say poetry tea times are for everybody. We do them, but if you, we do them in a way that works for us. I don't know if we're doing them like everybody else does them, but for one person, you might see these pictures and you might say, oh, look at them doing this beautiful poetry tea time with this beautiful china and the Victorian lace. And then in your home, you've got disco music
Yeah,
playing and you're reading like rap music for poetry. And I don't know, like
yeah,
you're just doing whatever suits you. But what is it that you really liked about that? It
yes.
was a routine of doing something to gather everyone, however so often you're doing it, and an experience of doing something together, right? So take what it is that you actually like about the experience and make it meaningful for you.
Yeah, that's such a great idea because especially I feel like in Charlotte Mason circles, like there's all these like subjects and are like, I'm supposed to do Swedish drill and Sloyd and like all these weird things nobody talks about anymore. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do and SOFA and all these things. And it's like, okay, what's the actual like meaning behind that?
Yeah,
Okay, it's teaching your kids music and singing and teaching your
right.
kids to make stuff with their hands. Like
Hmm.
taking the principle behind it and finding something that
Yeah,
works for your family in today's time period, but it's going back to the heart of the matter is to move their bodies in different ways. And
yeah.
and I think that like ties in perfectly with what you're saying. But so this is really funny. My daughter for her 16th birthday wanted like a Victorian tea party picnic thing. And so we got the china teacups out and the pillows and all this stuff. And everybody wore like beautiful dresses and stuff. And she was sitting there, she's talking to her friends. And she goes, this reminds me of when we were little and we used to do poetry tea time.
Oh,
And my mom would have set out the little china and we'd have cookies and we'd all get to read a poem. And like her friends aren't homeschooled and they were all like, that sounds amazing. What an
mm.
amazing childhood you had. And it was like so cool for like me to hear that and be like,
Yes.
but again, it's what was meaningful was the memory, like the time and doing the routine, doing something over and over again. So it becomes part of your family culture
Yes,
rather than just, oh,
exactly.
one-off thing or one-off thing. I love what you said too about like joy isn't fun. Because I feel like we feel this
Mm.
pressure, like we have to make every lesson fun and exciting. And Charlotte Mason talks about the teacher being like the circus master and like put on this
Yes.
big production. And it's you're not actually getting the joy out of the learning, you're getting the joy out of the being entertained.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And everything, and sometimes we have this idea that everything has to feel fun with this big adrenaline rush at the end of it. When it's you're thinking about joy as being aligned with what's meaningful and aligned with your values, then that means that you're going to say you're probably going to experience a lot of joy when you're just sitting side by side with your kid and he
Mhm.
finally gets a math concept
Yeah.
that you are have been working really hard on for the last 3 months, and you got it at a moment where there were no tears and you two were deeply connected,
Yeah.
and you were like you felt it was a highly relational moment. That's probably like, if that's what you value, that's
Yes.
probably going to be like, oh, that was joyful. Was it fun for your kid? Maybe not. Was it fun for you? I don't know. It's not about fun.
Yes. That
Sometimes
is
it
such a
can be. Sometimes it can be.
yes, that is such a great distinction. So
Yeah.
parents who are like, and I think people are asking these questions more and more. I hear
Hmm.
from people like we now are all well aware that the traditional modern industrialized education system is not working. So
Right.
what can we do different? What does that look like? And it's again,
Hmm.
it's having those uncomfortable conversations and thinking through these big ideas. But if
Hmm.
someone's like considering, okay, I I want to do something different. How can I actually slow down? What does that actually practically look like in my homeschool on
Mm.
Tuesday?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that could be so many things.
Yes, right.
um,
Loaded
and
question.
yeah, yeah, because one of the things that I hope people walk away from this book understanding is that when when you think, okay, what are my big takeaways from this book? How might I go and really incorporate this idea of slow into my own life? It will never look the same as mine
Yep.
or the next person, because my own experience doesn't even look the same day to day.
Mhm.
If you said to me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, how did you incorporate the idea of slow? I might tell you some of the same things when it comes to routine. If that's an element that I'm using to invite that idea of slow, really a scaled back routine, then that's something that might appear daily. But on Monday, it might have been really embracing deep connection. On Tuesday, it might have been really exploring personal interests and self-directed learning with my kids. On Wednesday, we could have been using our social studies curriculum, and it was all about asking questions and curiosity and going deeper in this unit study. On Thursday, it could have been, and that I'm not saying we weren't doing anything else those days, but those are the moments where I saw that idea of slow really coming in. So that's what I mean. Like this is not, it's more than just theories and philosophy,
Yes.
and it's not going to look the same for everybody doing it. And even in your own days, there's different parts to explore every day. It doesn't always have to be the same, or every year you can say, you know what, I've read this book and this idea of being out in nature,
Yes.
we are going to spend a whole year exploring that. That's how we're
Yeah.
going to explore this idea of slow. And maybe you never even think about the other things that
Yeah.
I've talked about in the book. But even just inviting in one element, what does it cause you to do? Slow down and reflect and home in on what's meaningful. That's the point.
Yes. And I love that too, because that's not overwhelming, right? You're not having to redo everything. Okay. Like pick one
Exactly.
thing, incorporate it, try
Hmm.
it, see if that resonates with your values and what you find meaningful. So what are some of those elements? You mentioned
Hmm.
nature
Hmm.
and self-directed learning.
Yeah, for sure. I have learned for us, one of the key elements is that self-directed. So I have this whole chapter on self-directed learning and that element. And then in the very next chapter, I did this on purpose. I talk about curiosity and spontaneity and surprise and wonder, but all of that built into no matter what you're doing, even if you're not talking about self-directed learning, maybe you're using curriculum, or maybe you're doing unit studies, or maybe so there's elements of, so it's about playing with timing and learning. So when I think about curiosity and when I think about spontaneity, those are all like, curiosity is like allowing the imagination and the thought life to really linger somewhere. There's time involved in that.
Yes.
Spontaneity, that feels a little quicker to me. But I do bring in the idea about how spontaneity actually does involve some planning in instances, and about making space for certain things to happen. So, making space for going deeper in something, making space to spontaneously decide to go and visit somewhere maybe that you've read about or explored about, or go see an art exhibit, making space for just stillness and and not having a plan, making space for your children to be able to explore their own interests deeply. So those are some of the other elements that I bring in. Yes, I talk about nature, and I can't separate growth and learning from a disc like, to me, there's a connection to place and where you are in the world, and nature is a part of that. And so that's a big element in there as well. I hope I'm remembering them all. Goodness. What are some other ones, other elements that I bring in? Even the way we look at children's growth and development. There's a chapter on how we look at progress over time.
Yes, I really want to talk about that because that's huge.
Yeah.
Because when
Yeah.
I get this question all the time, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not giving them worksheets and tests, how do I know they're actually learning anything? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, because
Mm-hmm.
they're talking to you about what they're learning all the time.
Yes, yes,
Okay, yeah,
yes.
you're hearing it constantly, but okay. And so it's Strawberry talks about like pulling up the plant to see if it's growing, and then you just kill the plant. So we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
That's not funny, but
Yeah.
as I'm
You
thinking
were
about my
like,
garden.
okay, I'm gonna let it. And if I actually filmed a reel with me out in my garden going, something's wrong with my plants. Can you all help me? Because one plant was this big and one plant was this big. And it was a joke, but it was like I planted these at the same time. They should all be the same height by now.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah.
We do
We
that with
need,
our own children, right?
yes,
Your brother
yes,
at 7 was doing XYZ. Why aren't you doing? Or Susie down the street is doing blah, blah, blah. Why aren't we don't say that out loud, but in our head, we're thinking it most of the time. And so
right.
it's like, how do we have the faith to allow for sometimes a slower growth than what we're
Yes,
expecting?
yes. Or why do we always feel the need to always quantify it and qualify it and like
Because it makes us
put
feel safe.
a number to it? Yeah. Like, how about that aspect of it? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with tests, because some parents like them, some parents use them, but sometimes we tend to rely on the methods that traditional education use because that's what we know, that's what we remember, that's what we experience. We can't possibly imagine any other ways that you can look at a child's growth or look at or talk what a child knows. And conversation is a really big one. And if you're in that type of environment where you are constantly having conversations with your children, where they're constantly talking to you about the material that you're experiencing, when you're reading aloud books and you're having great discussions about them, you can see the
Yeah.
progress. You can see the
Yeah.
development. Like, it's right there. And then you tell them, okay, take a test on it just so I can make sure. And then they bomb the test and you're like, you don't know anything. It's like,
Yeah.
wait a second.
Or what they know, what they're telling you may not be what you think is important.
Yes, that's a big piece as well, because we've said that, which is another, that's so in the book, I describe this experience of having my daughter. We do a lot of self-reflection, where
Yes, I love that.
the,
So
the
good.
kids are the kids are reflecting on their own growth
Mhm.
and their own development. So I tell about this one experience where my daughter was doing this self-reflection about her writing growth, and she had this particular piece of writing that she was looking at as she was doing the reflection, and she was telling me in this reflection how she wanted her work to be read. Okay. Like she was telling me that in this beginning, she was working on this scene with these characters where it was like, it felt like a bang of a moment. And then little elements and pieces were revealed because there were characters that she was bringing in I mean, it was like, it was beautiful. And it was like the work, this is what fiction, she was a
Yeah.
piece of fiction that she was writing. And this is like real stuff. She was working on some hard stuff that's challenging to get in fiction writing. And I thought about that and I was like, if I had never had that conversation with her, if she had never done that reflection, and I was just sitting there saying, your intro did not have 5 paragraphs, or you did not capitalize the first
Yeah.
word of every sentence, I would like, that's what I would have been measuring for. And I would have lost all of the learning and the growth that actually was happening simply because I wasn't measuring for it. Like and it has to be, it.
Today's episode is brought to you by A Gentle Feast. A Gentle Feast offers a complete living books curriculum, an award-winning early reading program, and more tools to equip you to apply Charlotte Mason's timeless philosophy into your modern homeschool. Go to agentlefeast.com to check it out. Smooth and easy days are closer than you think.
So we have to think about ways that we can allow for that to actually notice for ourselves how much more growth and learning is happening beyond what even you thought you were teaching in certain moments, because of what they're reflecting on and what they're seeing as their own progress and their own growth. Sometimes it's not all about what we want. We have to, and I
I
see
know
that
everything, and my child should learn at every
I
stage.
know. It would be so much easier if that was. I see that a lot when it comes to the interest that my children explore, because a lot of times they'll set out and they'll just be really passionate about something and they'll tell me all their ideas. And because I'm like passionate about mentoring them, I'll be like, oh my gosh, you should do this and you should do this and you should do this and you should contact this person. Oh my God, I know this scientist you should write to. And they'll just sometimes be like, that's great, but that's not what I want to do. That's not the, and they'll decide to do something different, or they might take one of your ideas, or they might have a whole other plan about, and at that moment, it's which is more important. And if you have a true relationship with your child and a mentoring relationship, they are going to listen to your advice and they are going to think about your ideas, but it's not about making a checklist and being like, do this and this, and that will be a project. And it's like,
I'm so glad you want to learn about this. I have created a whole unit for you.
Exactly.
And these are the 10 things you're going to do in it. Doesn't this sound fun?
Right.
You're like, no.
Meanwhile, they probably become so deflated because they actually had a plan that you just weren't willing to hear. And their plan included a lot of real learning and real discovery about themselves and for themselves. And they were so on board about being independent, about doing things, but then we just squash it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's great. You talked about, okay, so some of these tools for measuring growth that are not traditional. So allowing the child to have time for self-reflection, which is great, because that's like a skill that's going to help you be like just an amazing human being, like the ability to like self-reflect. Most adults can't do that. So that's a great thing to start having them do. How did you do on that? What did you think? Taking the pressure off of you and putting more of the responsibility on them. That's awesome. You also mentioned collections.
Yes.
Hear about that?
Yes. Yeah. So I love collections. So this is actually something that when I explained before about my school environment that I worked in, this is something we did in this school environment. The kids had these collections, these work collections, and the collections followed them. If they were in this school from pre-K to 6th grade, they would have these collections that like the previous teacher would give to you. And it was great. And often we had the same children for more than a year. It wasn't like the handoff wasn't as frequent as you might be imagining. But what I loved about it is that it was a collection of work that wasn't just the finished product. It was also a collection. You captured the process of learning and the process of work, because you were collecting pieces of the child's work at different stages of development, even if it was like a photo, or sometimes there was work that was unfinished in there, but it wasn't, it spoke of things that a child did. It spoke of their interests. And what I loved was when the children would look at their own collections and just see what they saw, just notice themes that emerged, notice growth in themselves, notice work they abandoned but maybe want to go back to. And so one time at home, we have work collections for our kids. And when my kids were young, often these collections were just like these huge plastic bins that I bought at the dollar store. And they
Yes.
were just like so many paintings and
Yep.
drawings just like in there. And then, but you have to make yourself go through them because
Mm,
they can easily just become storage.
right.
And so my daughter was, we carve out parts of the day where we're just going to really explore interest and passion. So it was like the time of the day. My kids were younger, and my daughter was just like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to work with today, or I'm giving all the suggestions. Do you
Yeah.
want to do this? And I was like, well, let's pull out your work collection. I'll never forget, pulled out this bin, and she was so excited because she got so excited to look at her own work. And she was just laying out these pieces. And I had walked out of the room for a little bit, and I came back and she had categorized all of the paintings. I was
Mm.
like, what are you doing? And she said, Mommy, did you notice that I draw a lot of nature scenes? And I was like, I had noticed that. And I was like, but tell me more about what you're noticing. And she was like, forget what I'm noticing. I'm really connected to nature themes, and I don't know enough about birds. I really
Mm.
need to know a lot more about birds. And she just, it was just like, I don't even know all of the thought
Yeah,
process that was like
right.
happening in her mind, but she just locked onto birds. It became an obsession for the next few years, to the point that she is 14 now and she is still our resident bird nerd.
Yeah.
And this was like
You don't
back
need
from
the
when
Merlin app. You got her, right?
oh man, yeah, I could tell
That's
you
awesome.
stories. Like she can go outside and call certain birds
Wow.
because
That is amazing.
can mimic their sound. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's
it
so
was like
cool.
years, just journey of learning about birds, biology of birds, writing bird stories, building a bird feeder with her father, bird boxes, bird feeders, writing journals, making games. Like it was just all about birds, and so much learning and so much
Mm.
growth happening. And I'm saying all that to say that she discovered that passion and she discovered that interest just by looking at a collection of her work.
Wow.
And so much more learning happened because we use that collection to look at themes, or she used it to look at some themes in her work and figure out where she wanted to go next. Like it was like in the collection becomes an ongoing part of your current experience. And it's different from a portfolio in the sense that you're putting your most polished work and your best work
Right.
for someone else to look at. No, this wasn't for someone else besides me and her family.
Right. Right.
It was for her. And it was a collection of her work that wasn't necessarily polished, wasn't necessarily her best, but just what she did, what she put her hands on, what she put her mind to, and just having a way to collect it all and look back and reflect on it.
Yeah, I love that distinction because when you first said that, I thought portfolios back from my old
Mm-hmm.
teacher days.
Right,
And
right.
that if we really want our kids to get the message that education is not a means to an end, education is the end, we have to value the messy.
Yes, yes.
And this is beautiful. This is you working through this thing that like none of the things are capitalized and all the words are spelled wrong, and you're working through this. And like I can save this.
Yes,
And it's so cool.
exactly.
Like when, I have two grown children now and I have all teenagers that I'm still homeschooling. And it's like, when
Mm-hmm.
we look back on like their little notebooks from when they were little and we just
Hmm.
laugh and it's so cute.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You could
And you
definitely
know
see
it
the growth.
for sure. And when it comes to some of those self-directed interests that my kids like to pursue, they, especially as they get older and they feel a real
Yes.
need to do it, they are documenting their own process. And not everyone is doing it all the time, and not everyone is doing it the same way, depending on what they're working on. But like, um, when I had my daughter, she was really into dog training and wanting to train dogs, or even she's also an artist. So just, I'm just thinking of different times where she
Yeah.
would like, and I'd only learn this because she like let me in on the secret. It's not even like she was like showing me these journals every day, but she'd be like, Mommy, I'm keeping a journal like my feelings on my process. And I'm like, what? Can I see it? And it's, you shared with me that one about this one artist who would always like talk about how they felt about some of the things that were created. So I started, tried it out. And it's, so I'd see this journal and it would be like 50 drawings of hands. And she would be, right, I'm failing at hands. Why are hands so hard? How do you draw a human hand? And
Yeah.
just, but I loved that because it was another way to capture the
Yeah.
process. Did she ever learn to draw hands? Who cares, really? It was about what she did and the learning that happened as she was trying. I don't mean who cares, like
Yeah.
nobody cares. I just mean that the
It wasn't
important
the
parts of that
outcome,
experience.
it was the
Right.
process that was actually valued. No, I
Yeah.
got you, girl. I totally understood what you were saying.
Okay. Okay, good.
And so talk a little bit, let's dive in a little bit more about the self-directed part, because I
Mhm.
feel like it is one of the gifts of having shorter like education, shorter lessons. So we're done by lunch. So we have
Mhm.
time in the afternoons. And when they're little, it's more playing and acting out what they've
Mhm.
been learning with their
Yeah.
Legos,
Mhm.
or they're dressing up and acting out the Revolutionary War or whatever. They have time for that because
Mhm.
the schedule's not so overbooked. But even as
Exactly.
high schoolers, allowing for those shorter
Mhm.
lessons so that they can really get into some more passions that will probably further them
Yeah,
in adult life.
for
And so
sure.
how, because oftentimes we could think of a slow growing time, that's okay for like little kids. But as they get
Mhm.
older, we got to fill their
Mhm.
days with a bunch of activities so that they have this amazing college application and all these things, and we can say that they passed these things. And now, like, how do we slow
Mhm.
down and let our teens have that time for self-directed learning?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think a lot of times as our kids get older, we think that our responsibility is to help them engineer their experiences and let's make you look good so that you look more, because you are thinking about some of the other things that come beyond college or anything beyond high school. And I think that's a time to really stop and reflect even more because our teens deserve some of those same things we were giving them when they were younger, or we're giving our younger children if we still have them when we have the teens. They also need rest. They need time to explore themselves, to do things that interest them. And if we have completely packed their schedule with what we think is most important because we're trying to graduate them, then they've lost out on some of those elements as well. And sometimes we don't even ask our teens, what do you want to do? And how, even in terms of some of the credits that we're trying to help them
Yes.
fulfill. It's, can we have a conversation about the
Yep.
best way that we could even fulfill this credit requirement? It doesn't have to be what's in your mind, mom. It can be, but that's not the only, can we just admit that's not the only way?
Yeah, like one
You
of my
know?
daughters is really into makeup, and it's
Mhm.
okay, that's your fine art credit.
Exactly.
We have
Exactly.
that freedom and
Exactly.
that flexibility that they don't have in school.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that sometimes it just requires a conversation because sometimes people don't realize that that possibility actually is there, that the teen could be exploring interests and passions, and we can actually formulate those into and put those on high school transcripts and things like that. So sometimes it's just a conversation. But when it comes to making sure that we are still incorporating some of those same things for our teens, I think that's so important. And by the time they are teenagers, chances are, if we have been valuing things like their own curiosity towards things, and they probably have a lot of passions that they want to explore at that point. Like my older kids wake up in the mornings and they tell me, they're like, listen, woman,
I love
today
that.
I want to do, they always have a list for me. Like my son just said to me the other day, I want to finish this book. I'm on book 2 of the series. I'm not saying I need to finish the whole series, but it is on my list of things to do to finish book 2. Okay. Okay. And he'll look at it, and I
Yeah.
know why he's saying that to me. He's, don't give me so much to
Yes,
do.
right.
I don't get to do this one thing. Or,
I feel that, man, because it's hard when you have to like, you're really into a book. I like
yes.
can only read so much fiction in my life because it's like, oh, you guys like want to eat today? I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of this book and the whole world comes to an end. So I can only read fiction on vacation.
That is very true. Sorry, I felt that really deeply.
I can tell. We're like kindred spirits.
Yes. Oh man, I could probably go off on a whole tangent, but anyway, I won't. It's true. There are just some books that really just capture you and pull you in. But
Turtles for
sorry,
real.
it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, no, it's truly. But I feel like it's all about, with older children and teens, it's about Are you creating a kind of environment at home that creates space for them, for those kinds of things, for slowing down? And for rest is a big one. Teenagers especially often have a different clock
Oh, yes.
than than other children, even
Mhm.
adults. And a lot of times they're sleeping longer
Yep.
on the front end of the day,
Yep.
and they want to stay up later and talk,
To
talk, talk.
you at 11
Yes,
o'clock. Yep.
yes, yes, yes. And we are also, this is the time of their lives where we also want to, we're setting them up for what comes next and wanting them to learn healthy habits and things like that. And so why aren't we talking about planning and routines and schedules and saying, and doing that side by side with them and talking through some of the things that you're going through in your mind when you create a schedule for a day, or what, or a to-do list, or how are we making sure to schedule time for rest, or schedule time for your passions, or schedule time for like time is
Ooh.
so much more expansive than we give credit for sometimes. And if we don't help our kids to manage those sorts of things, then they'll become adults who waste massive amounts of time on social media
Mhm.
and don't ever have time to explore passions and interests or read, or do you know what I mean?
Well, I
Um,
think some of the struggle I hear, and probably why this is hard for parents to do for their teens, is because they don't do it for themselves.
yeah, that's
Because
true.
I don't make time for myself to rest. I
Mhm,
I'm so busy taking care of everybody else. I don't deserve to have time to rest, or I don't have time to follow my passions because I'm
mhm.
so busy homeschooling and making sure everyone is fed and alive at the end of the day. That like, when am I going to fit that in?
Yeah,
So it's you have to learn that time management for yourself
yeah.
first.
For sure. And often that's actually why I actually advocate for doing so many of these things alongside your children. Like why I carve out time for us to explore interests and passions is because guess what? When they're doing this, I'm doing it too. And they actually see me. Oh man, mommy, what are you working on? I'm taking this art class. Look,
Yep.
it's right here online. Look what I'm doing. This art instructor is asking me to do X, Y, and Z. It's crazy. But because it's built in. I'm not trying to wait till they go to bed. I'm not trying to wait till I have time for
Mhm.
myself. I'm saying no, this is what we do. This is how we organize our day. This is an important piece of learning for all of us. And so I'm gonna do it right alongside of you. That's actually why, one of the reasons why I advocate for that. And if you send a message where just in how you set up your routines and schedules, that rest is not important, or having time to do nothing is
Mhm.
not important for whatever reason, what does that say? What sort of message does that send for children? How will they go on to take care of those kinds of things for themselves? What's important? So what do we do together every Friday? It fills me up, and my kids have come to love it. But I did it because that's a whole nother conversation. But on Fridays we go hiking.
I love
And
that.
yeah, we spend time outdoors, and it's, to me, that's very restful. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about, we just came back from a big family vacation.
Yes, I saw
Where
that
we
on
went,
Instagram.
yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
we went to Utah and we toured the national parks. Now, when I say I love hiking, there were some days we were hiking like 12 miles, and my husband was like, "Listen, this was not a vacation. This was a hiking trip."
Yes, those are two different things.
But I was like, "For you," and he fully recognized that. He was like, "I get it. This was all you," because for me that was so restful.
That is awesome. I'm going with 1,000 hours outside to Moab,
Gonna do
September.
it.
Yes,
Oh, that's
I'm so
so
excited. I've
amazing.
never
Oh,
been, but your pictures on Instagram looked incredible.
I'm like so excited for you because you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. That was actually one of my favorite of all the parks and all the places to
Arches.
be. Yes.
Yeah.
I want to go back.
That's so great. But see, Leslie, you are just a ball of light and energy right now
Oh,
because you're talking about something that
I
is
know.
passionate for you and lights you up. And this is what I love that you just said.
Mhm.
My kids grew to like it.
Yes. Hmm.
So you're doing something that you love and you're modeling for them how to have
Yes.
a passion about something, how to make time. I mean, I'm sure it was
Mm-hmm.
like a big cost. Like you have to make time, you have to make money, you have to be intentional with your life choices. But this is
Hmm.
something I love, but they don't necessarily have to like the same thing.
Yes. And you know why? And that's why I say slowing down is about finding that balance.
Yeah.
It's finding a balance between exploring the things your kids love, doing things that you love, because you're doing it and you want them to see that for different reasons, right? You want them to see passion, but you have to make time for
Right.
all of it. So it's just It's just taking a breath and allowing if the balance is what you're after, then you're not going to, then that means, yeah, then 4 days a week you might be doing this, and 1 day a week you might be doing this, but you're not going to feel bad on the 1 day of the week that you're not doing the other thing that you were doing the 4 days a week because you actually want to do the one thing. It's balance, and you're not going to feel guilty and beat yourself up because you've created something that you feel is balanced. That doesn't mean you're doing everything perfectly, because balance is a little more tricky than that. You find balance in a way that doesn't always feel perfect. Yeah. Sorry, just got really charged up about that.
Oh, I love it. Get on the soapbox. Yes. Preach it. We need this, right? Yes. If you are doing what you value and you're making time for it, then you don't have to feel guilty that you're not, because
Yes.
you are doing those other things. And then you're taking this time for what matters. But if you're just like every day kind of goes by the wind and you might do this and then you might do that, but you've never really thought ahead about any of it. And then you're burnt out and you're exhausted and you're like, I'm not doing anything I like.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you have to be intentional.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
key. So I could probably talk to you for another 17 hours, but our kids probably want to eat dinner. Just to include, okay, so was there any other encouragement or words that you wanted to make sure that you told the parents about this concept of finding the joy in slow?
I would just say it is possible to have a joyful experience. Remember that joy is about aligning what you're doing with something that's meaningful, aligning that to your values. And so don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Don't be afraid to ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing and to explore how it could possibly be better. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. The idea is that I would encourage you to slow down to find just one meaningful thing that you can hold on to, and that's going to breathe life for you and your family. Because the joy in the end is what everybody is going to remember. No one is going to remember the algebraic equation that you taught on Tuesday. Everyone is going to remember the joy that you experienced.
Yes. And having adult children, I can definitely say
Yes.
that is 100% true. They won't always remember every lesson. I heard someone say, and I wish I could know who say it so I can give them credit, but they will not remember every lesson, but they will remember how they felt.
Yeah, that's fun.
If you don't have that joy, what they're going to feel is probably not what you want them to remember. And so it is cultivating that joy and that passion and those life-giving things within yourself that you can show up with joy and show up how you want, and to leave enough room in your schedule and to develop a mindset where you can rest.
Yes.
And find that
such a big one.
And breathe, because we put so much pressure on ourselves that we
Yes.
can't even breathe. And then we wwonder why we're so tired, because you haven't breathed all day.
Yes. And learning and growth for you and for your children is happening even when you feel like you're messing it up, and even when it doesn't feel perfect yet. It's not going to ever be perfect, but even when it doesn't feel good yet, there's still learning and growth happening. So it's okay. Just take a breath.
That is such a good message. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. How can people find the book and find you?
Oh my goodness. You can always find me at lesliemartino.com. The book, if you go to that website, actually, there's a book page that shows all the retailers, but go to any retailer, find The Joy of Slow. It's there. And thank you. Thank you, Julie, for having me here, for having me on this podcast. It was so fun talking to you. I loved it.
Yeah, it was a really
Really
great conversation.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, how delightful was that conversation? Leslie Martino is so amazing. Don't forget to check out her new book, The Joy of Slow. We will link it in the show notes. But before we end today's episode, I just want to recap a few takeaways from our conversation. Number one, remember the power of slowing down. Leslie explained how slowing down allows for more meaningful learning experiences. It's not about doing more, but about going deeper and truly engaging with the material. Number two, align with your personal values. Joy in homeschooling comes from aligning activities and routines with what is genuinely meaningful and valuable to your family. Leslie emphasizes the importance of reflecting on and understanding your own values to create a fulfilling educational experience. Number three, you need to have alternative methods to assess progress. Traditional tests and worksheets are not the only ways to measure learning. Leslie discussed the value of self-reflection, maintaining collections of the student's work, and other creative ways to assess progress and growth in your children. You need to incorporate self-directed learning. Giving children time and space to explore their interests deeply can lead to incredible learning opportunities.
Leslie shares practical ways to integrate self-directed learning into your homeschool routine. And last, but definitely not least, remember the importance of balance and rest. Both children and parents need time to rest and pursue their passions. Leslie talked about the necessity of creating a balanced schedule that includes time for relaxation and personal interests, highlighting the importance of modeling this behavior for your children. Don't forget to check out the show notes for today for all the resources mentioned, and thanks for listening. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, please heart it down below and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave a comment and let me know what you learned in today's episode. I'd love to hear from you.